want to welcome you all to the March 12 meeting of the Frankfort Franklin County Planning Commission. We're sorry for the delay, but we've got the technology up and running so that we can take care of official business. A couple of housekeeping items that we need to touch on before we get into business of the commission. One, I think you all have already defeated one of our purposes. To begin with, we were concerned about the health and safety of individuals attending our meeting. Therefore, chairs were removed in order to create space between the attendees such that they would not be subject to immediately catch this coronavirus thing. You know, the advice is to put a little space between you so that you wouldn't breathe it in immediately, but you all have defeated that. Please be advised that it was the intent to protect you. Using your own judgment, you can create the space again or stay where you are. We'll accept either. Secondly, under that same rubric was the idea that we should advise you that you exit this room until the item for which you came to speak or observe is called on the agenda. We'll leave it to your discretion as to whether or not you exit the room. If there are any questions regarding that, please inform me now. Otherwise, we're going to move forward with the meeting. Okay, we're moving forward with the meeting. Madam Secretary, if you would, please call the roll.
Catherine Bennett. David Boggs.
Here.
Patty Cross.
Here.
Joyce Honaker.
Here.
Keith Lee.
Here.
Timothy Lusher.
Here.
Jim Nickel. Charles Stewart.
Here.
Jim Terrell.
Present.
Russell Wright.
Here.
Sharon Jackson.
Here.
We have a quorum with 9.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes, February 13, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion for payment of bills as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly second that we pay the bills as identified on the agenda. Is there discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion carries. Do we have any reports of officers? Standing committees? Eric and Robert, did you all find a good day for the zoning ordinance update committee? If not, we'll just await any.
I believe we've got that penciled in for the 25th, 5:30 City Hall. Pending any changes with our current
I thought it was 16. That's what this week.
March 25th.
Zoning ordinance update, 25 March.
This
Okay.
zoning update, right.
Are there questions of Eric on that? Seeing none, hearing none. Special orders, don't have any special orders. However, I do want to ask the director of both the city and the county planning divisions to go ahead and please request in your budget for the upcoming fiscal year funds to secure the services of a consultant, please, to assist us with the comprehensive plan update / development. Are there any other staff items? Okay, Madam Secretary, if you don't mind, please call the first item.
This is a public hearing. Cannon Properties LLC is requesting approval of a zone map amendment from limited commercial CL to industrial commercial IC for 3.13 acres identified as Tract 1A, 1B, and Tract 2 of the Suburban Park subdivision located at 1003 and 1005 Twilight Trail. The plat of record is filed in Cabinet E, slide 541, in the office of the Franklin County Clerk. The property is specifically identified as PBA map number 050-00-00-092.01.
Mr. Logan, if you don't mind, would you please qualify staff?
Sir, Mr. Judah, would you state your name for the record, please?
Ben Judah, Franklin County Planning and Zoning.
And what is your position with the County of Franklin?
I'm planning supervisor.
And how long have you been in that capacity?
A year and a couple of months.
Could you briefly give us your training, education, and experience in the area of planning?
Yes, I have a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Louisville, along with a certificate in real estate development.
Get him to sign up in a minute.
And have you reviewed the application before us tonight concerning a zone map amendment from limited commercial to industrial IC?
I have.
And have you reduced your findings to a staff report?
Yes.
Did you make recommendations in that staff report?
Yes.
Are there any additions or deletions to the staff report as prepared?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the staff report and the attachments be filed in lieu of additional testimony on those items by Mr. Judah.
Okay, so ordered.
Mr. Judah, would you briefly indicate the basis of your staff report and how you came to this conclusion for the commission?
Yes.
Before he begins, I made a mistake and I need to correct. I need all of the individuals in the room who wish to speak for or against this application to please come forward and sign here. Okay, we only have one, sir. Pardon me, sir. If you don't mind, just swear him in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, back to my last question, Mr. Judah, would you briefly summarize for the commission the basis on which you prepared this report and your recommendation?
I'd be happy to. So the subject property is 3.13 acres. Its present use is, or in the past, it's been used as office and commercial. The proposed use is for a self-storage facility. It's surrounded by a mixture of land uses and zones. To the north, it's got commercial highway zoning and planned commercial. The interstate's not too far to the north as well. To the south, it's got CH zone. To the east, it's got IC zoning on the other side of 127. And to the west, it's got rural residential C zoning. In the past One of these buildings was home to the ABC office for the state. And I'd also like to advise the commission that item 2 on the agenda tonight is a variance request in relation to this item as well. Staff does have 5 findings of fact for this item. The comprehensive plan future land use map designates the property as regional retail. The industrial commercial zone district is not an appropriate zone for the regional retail center. Self-storage facilities, there is a self-storage facility at 1175 Twilight Trail, and it was built prior to the current regional retail designation and also built prior to residential development in the area. The subject property is in the area with a mixture of zoning designations and land uses. And 5, the subject property is within 1 mile of the interstate. Staff is recommending it be denied. And I would like to enter my report and testimony into the record. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does any commissioner have questions, staff?
I do. Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lee.
So staff, industrial, commercial, you know, that encompasses a whole lot of things. I mean, light manufacturing, stuff like this, so it seems like resident, for a self-storage building, there should be a better designation. It just wouldn't fit with moving to commercial, and what is the reason for that?
The land use table, the permitted uses for self-storage facility is the AG agricultural zone, the IC industrial commercial zone, and the more intense IG industrial zone are the only permitted zone districts. So when speaking with the applicant, we went with the lesser of the intense industrial districts.
But for what he wants to do with it, because the buildings are already there, he's not gonna be building anything else on it. He's not gonna be manufacturing anything on it, so, and to be quite honest, wouldn't this have a less intense use as far as traffic and various other things than the LC?
The limited commercial zone?
Yeah.
The limited
CL,
commercial,
excuse me, CL.
yeah, the CL zone does not permit self-storage units.
Okay, so he has to change it.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's my question.
Actually, I have a follow-up question with that, so Mr. Judah. To clarify, is he or is he not building on this site?
The applicant stated that he intends to develop the site in phases. The first phase would be to retrofit the existing 1003 structure into a self-storage facility, and then if business goes well, he will further develop the site, adding new structures and removing the 1005 structure to those more traditional self-storage buildings that you see.
Other question?
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question. Does any of the adjoining neighbors, have they contacted you and asking questions or not in favor of this?
I have not heard from any adjoining property owners.
Okay, so there's no opposition to this?
No, sir.
By the neighbors? Okay, thank you.
Other question? Does the applicant have a question of Mr. Judah? Okay. Mr. Judah, thank you, sir. We'll call you back if you have another question to come up.
Thank you.
The applicant would please come forward. We'll ask you to please state your name and address for the record, please.
Name's Dan Pfister. I live at 990 Sellers Mill Road in Versailles, Kentucky.
Okay, if you'll present your case.
Okay. First, I want to thank Mr. Judah for being so pleasurable to work with during this process and doing a very thorough staff report. But I do disagree with his recommendation to deny the project. When he was asked about the current use of the property, only one building was used as office type space. The other one is a warehouse. Has been, always has been. And in fact, the zone change on it could stand on its own under KRS 100.213A because the warehouse use of that building is not allowed under the limited commercial. How it got to be there, how it got to be zoned that, I do not know. I assume they changed it at some point, but in 1972, when those buildings were built, they were both built to be warehouses. What we intend to do is strictly rehab the 1003 building, come in and take the partition walls out of the old warehouse and put in partition walls that allow us to do a storage facility. Exterior will not be changed at all. The only reason we came up with a development plan is we were asked to. We do not intend at this point to go any further. We've got a good tenant in the 1005 building. Would like to keep them there. We just want to do the one building at this time. In the future, if it comes up, we will go through the building process and the codes and what have you. Couple of items in his, Mr. Judah's finding of fact. The comprehensive plan, in item 1, he quotes as being a regional retail center. But we must note that the designation is by virtue of proximity to the interstate. It doesn't have anything to do with anything that's currently on that road at all or in that area. And secondly, there's a lot of industrial commercial zoning in that area. There's already 3 storage facilities, one within 862 feet from our property. We think it would be an asset to the area, a good help for the residents, and we just want to be a good neighbor. What we're looking at here, we're not changing anything from the view of the people from the street or the neighborhood behind us. We just want to move forward. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
I have one. Mr. Chairman, if a condition was placed on this property to prohibit manufacturing, would you be opposed to that?
Not at all.
Thank you. That's my question.
Other questions, the applicant by commissioners? Staff has a question of the applicant?
No, sir.
Mr. Fisher, if you don't mind having a seat and let us discuss this issue for a minute.
Thank you for your
Before we
time.
go.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask my question?
Yes, sir.
Can we act on this tonight, or do we need to prepare something based on the information given?
I think with only 2 witnesses, you probably could act on it tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Here for motion?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
Second.
Move properly second that the public hearing be closed. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman?
Act on it then.
Huh? Yeah.
Motion to adopt the summary. Act on it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the summary, in lieu of any as part of the testimony, and that we recommend approval of the zone map amendment based on findings of fact number 4 and number 5 on page 12 of the report.
Second?
Move properly second that the commission, yes, sir.
But I suggest consideration that since it's been determined by the report that it's not within the comprehensive plan for future land use, that we make an additional finding or consider making a finding that it is currently inappropriately zoned from the testimony of the applicant as to its use and surrounding uses.
I'll be more happy to make that amendment. And I need to, also that we're making approval, recommending to fiscal court approval of the zone amendment.
Second.
You got all that? You're good? Okay. We have a second.
Move properly second that a third finding be added to number 4 and 5 of the staff report.
Were you going to add the conditions?
Okay,
Oh, never mind.
we'll do that on the development plan.
I could, I don't think it's gonna be, unless it's gonna be necessary.
The second willing to add the third, okay. Move properly second. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, call the roll, Madam
Mr.
Secretary.
Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Honaker?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lusher?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Terrell?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Fisher. Pfister. I apologize. The commission has made a recommendation that your request be reported to fiscal court with a recommendation that the request for a zone change be approved. Okay, now, need to ask staff if that recommendation goes to fiscal court, is it then necessary to do item 1 on the new business? That's the development plan.
Yes, it would. Landscape buffer, yes.
Madam Secretary, would you call item 1 on the new business?
Yes, sir. Cannon Properties LLC is requesting a variance to section 4.406A, design criteria, to reduce the required visual landscape screen adjacent to any R district or residence from 80 feet to 65 feet, and a variance to reduce the setback for new construction next to a residential zone from 100 feet to 65 feet for tracts 1A, which is 1.22 acres, tract 1B, 0.98 acres of the Suburban Park subdivision located at 1003 and 1005 Twilight Trail. The property is specifically identified as PVA map number 050-00-00-092.01.
All right, so,
Judy?
Subject property, you may notice that the acreage on this is actually less than what was for the zone change, and that's because there's separate tracts, and this will only apply to 2 of the 3 tracts. The reason why this is also coming before you all is there is a provision in the zoning ordinance that allows for multiple items to be heard at the same hearing. By changing the zoning of this property, he would be creating a nonconformity to that setback due to the existing structures not being able to meet that setback requirement. Furthermore, new construction would also be subject to that setback. So just going through my slide here, subject property that this applies to be 2.14 acres. There's the site there and the current zoning. The Section 5.05 I was just referring to, avoiding duplicate hearings. This is the portion that we are discussing, Section 4.406, design criteria. The discusses the buffer, the required buffer of the landscape. So basically, the reasoning behind this is the existing structures are 60 feet and can't meet that 80-foot requirement due to the design criteria. So you'd be creating a nonconformity by changing the zoning. There is the existing site conditions right there. You got the two existing structures. This is what the applicant has proposed, multiple phases for them to do. They have there's the buffer area highlighted in blue towards the rear. As you can see, it doesn't extend towards the left side because that back portion there does not directly abut residential uses. In order for variance to be granted, according to section 14.05, criteria must be met before a variance is granted, items A through D. With my analysis, items D, B, and D had negative findings. Reading through D, it says the justification for the requirement of section 4.406A is to provide a buffer between incompatible uses and to protect residences from industrial encroachment. By reducing the buffer area, it could potentially invite industrial uses to an undesirable distance from residential uses. So if you change the zoning to an industrial zone and in the future this current use goes away, another industrial use could come in and be incompatible with the adjacent residential uses. So based upon that, staff is recommending it be denied.
Mr. Judah, if this were to be approved, would that change could pertain to any and all properties in the county, or is it just restricted to that?
Site specific.
What's that?
It's
Site specific, okay.
Yes, sir.
So if I'm reading this right, in order for him to be conformed, he's got to shave off 15 feet of his building to be compatible? Correct?
To be in compliance, the setback would be 80 feet.
The buildings are 65 feet away from the building, so we've got to cut 15 feet of his building
Unless
off.
this variance is granted, it allowing the reduction in the setback.
No, if I may, I'm sorry, excuse me. So no, what we're saying is that we would like the building to be in compliance, and the granting of the building setback variance
Will that
is something that we would like to have on the record if the commission chooses to acknowledge that. Otherwise, we would just note it as a nonconformity, and that's a spot on the file. So if you're okay with it, if you would grant the variance to the building, and then the landscaping is a separate issue.
Okay, so.
Okay, does that clear that up?
Can we approve variance for existing buildings and not for any potential buildings would have to have the 80-foot setback?
Well, the adjacent zoning, go back to the slide, if we could, go back to the one with the buildings.
I'd rather not do it for new stuff.
Next slide, please. Pointer. Where's the pointer? Is that button on top?
Pointer doesn't show up on TV.
Okay, so I'll approach the board. So, existing construction,
Right.
so that will remain. This new construction, the variance would allow for them to be in the same alignment as this building, so that will all be fine. This is adjacent to a commercial zoning, so that larger setback won't apply.
Okay.
Make sense? So if you grant the variance, then he can construct it in the same building line, which would be reasonable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Euler?
Thank you.
One more question.
Yes.
If we do leave it as a nonconformity, does that affect his current buildings or just future? Say if this applicant sold the property to someone else, would that property owner then have to come back to us to get conformity? What effect does the nonconformity have if we do not pass this?
It's,
It's
the
messy,
land can still be
yes.
transferred and developed and such, but it doesn't keep it clean. When title companies ask for any variances or nonconformities that are of record in our office, we have to note that. The code also says we have to notify the building owner or the property owner if there is an existing nonconformity. We have to track those. It's cleaner if you grant the variance, but and in this instance, since there is potential new construction on the redevelopment portion of the same site,
Right.
if we do it now, it allows it to line up with the existing building. And as Mr. Judah stated in the zone change report, this property was developed prior to the adjacent residential neighborhood
Right.
before it was done, or before it was completed or rezoned. So I think while administrators, we have to strictly adhere to the language in the regulation, you have the authority to amend it, and this might be a great example of exercising your authority to do so.
So with the nonconformity, if I understand this correctly, nothing has to happen to his current buildings, but any new construction would not be allowed to go past the current, or would that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, when the applicant made his presentation, he reported that the existing facility was constructed in 1972. If that be the case, that was prior to planning and zoning being adopted in Frankfurt and Franklin County. Am I mistaken on that?
No, sir, you are correct.
Which means that is how that facility got there without having to deal with the zoning ordinances that we have in place currently.
Correct.
That there was no zoning, and therefore the owner could, within reason, construct whatever he or she wished to construct. And when zoning was adopted, then a zoning designation was given to that property, or this property, and other properties in the area. And then as subsequent versions of the comprehensive plan was adopted, has been attempts on the part of the Planning Commission and Fiscal Court and City Commission to bring some sense of order to the manner in which property is developed in Frankfurt and Franklin County. So that's what got us to where we are today. I'm not speaking in favor or against, just attempting to clarify how we got to where we are. Now, other questions or comments regarding the request? Not? Mr. Judah, thank you very
Thank you.
much. The applicant would please come forward.
Any questions for him? I have a question, Mr. Chairman. You live with an 80-foot setback on new construction?
I didn't hear you.
If, right now, you're 60 feet away from the from existing construction, 60 feet, setback 65 feet,
Right.
which the variance allows for new construction to be 80 feet. If we
15 feet, right.
would you be fine with an 80-foot setback on new construction?
Yeah, my only concern with it is just from aesthetics. There's actually 4 buildings in this original development. We own 2 and other people own the other ones now. There's a current building line that's straight with those 4 buildings. If we don't allow the variance and there's new construction, it's gonna look funny with those buildings jogged in.
Okay.
I have no problem either way. So whatever y'all wanna do is fine.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Now, if you have any presentation that you need to make,
Have none
now's the
whatsoever.
time.
I don't know if it's part of this, and maybe I'm moving too far, though. What's the word I'm looking for? The landscaping issue. I believe that the ordinance calls for 6-foot evergreen trees planted 3 rows. This area that planting would be going in as a utility easement. There's sewer lines, water lines. I don't know, we don't object to putting up a barrier, but I don't know that we'll be physically able to put trees in there, just as a point of reference.
Well, we might need to ask staff whether or not we can actually have the plantings in that area.
Right. Well, we could do a privacy fence kind of thing or what have you, but I don't know with the roots if that's gonna
Let's
be
see if staff
compatible.
can answer that question.
Well, as you can see in this image, there are several underground utilities in that area. It's probably why the buildings were placed where they are. That provision of the regulation that requires both the building setback and the landscape all in the same paragraph, it's very difficult to comprehend sometimes, to wrap your head around. I do believe that some form of screening would be appropriate. I don't know that landscaping would be appropriate. Perhaps if the commission were to require fencing, that would probably be more effective and quicker at providing that visual and noise buffer. So staff would have no objection if the commission chose not to do greenery plantings, but to do fencing instead. The industrial zoning would allow fencing, I believe, as tall as 15 feet. Is that right, Ben? Will you look real fast, Article 6, please? So we could verify both material type and height if the commission chooses to.
Now, a 15-foot high fence along that property line, there's overhead
Oh,
line,
is it 8
overhead
feet?
wires, so it may interfere with that at that height.
So the maximum height is 8 feet.
Okay.
So staff would feel okay with something anywhere between the 6 and the 8, if we
Okay.
could. All right?
In that area, you have a treatment plant and a propane tank, is that right?
The propane
And underground
tank is-
electric,
There's underground electric, that propane tank is no longer there.
Okay. And the treatment plant in the corner, is that still?
is it still there?
I don't remember
I
a
don't-
tree being in
No,
there.
treatment plant. He's-
Oh,
Yeah,
treatment
the
plant, yes,
plant.
sir, yes, sir, it's very much there.
And it looks like there's a 2-inch water line in there as well.
There is.
Okay.
So perhaps if there were a fence on either perimeter, whether it be closer to the buildings or up by the property line, that'd probably be the most appropriate. I would say by the property lines, the utility companies could still access their facilities.
Yeah, that property line is very accessible through there, putting the fence up. Might have to move it a little bit because of a utility or something, but I don't see a problem putting it through
We just don't
there.
want to restrict the utility's ability to service.
Right.
So staff would have no objection.
Okay. What's the next item? I mean, you're doing a presentation here.
I'm done as far as that's concerned, I believe.
Okay.
I just asked for your approval. Any other
Thank you,
questions?
sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee.
I make a motion that we approve the variance to section 4.4.06, design criteria for required visual landscape screening to any R district or residents from 80 feet to 65 feet, with the condition that an 8-foot fencing be placed and be approved by the staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now, may I ask staff, is the motion sufficient to do what you need to get done?
May we include a material type? I would prefer maybe a board fence or like a privacy type
I put
fence.
approved by staff, you can approve whatever you want to approve.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Boggs.
Okay, who was my second?
Mr. Boggs.
Thank you.
Bob. Okay. Moved properly second. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, all in, well, no. Call roll, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Honaker?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lesher?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Terrell?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right. At this point, if I can have your attention, please. At this point, we're about to move to item 2 under new business, but prior to that, I have a point of clarification that we need to seek from our legal counsel. And if, Mr. Logan, if you're willing, I'll make my inquiry now and allow you to clarify things for us. As the commission knows, well, many of you, about a year ago, the Planning Commission was tasked by the city commission to review and offer recommendations with regard to a development plan that was submitted by the Frankfurt Electric Plant Board regarding construction off of Lafayette Drive. Subsequent to the commission following up on that request, the Frankfurt Electric Plant Board sued the Planning Commission for offering the recommendations requested by the city. And as part of that process, the plant board was instructed that it should resubmit at the appropriate time an application to the Planning Commission to again relook at whatever the design is for dealing with that construction. Since the time of the court proceeding, the Planning Commission attorney, the city attorney, and the attorney for the residents of the Tanglewood subdivision have been working on a separate process to resolve, I think, the legal proceedings. With the submission of the application by the plant board, it also brings to mind that there must be, at this time, some agreement or some proposal that exists with regard to resolving the lawsuit. And I'm asking our legal counsel to clarify for us as to whether or not, A, there's alignment between whatever that proposal is for resolving the lawsuit and the application that has been submitted by the Frankfurt Electric and Water Plant Board to this commission, such that it removes any and all liabilities related to the lawsuit from the Planning Commission. That's about as clear as the mud, but that's just about as clear as I can get it.
Your many years in education are showing, Jackson. The answer is there is a lawsuit filed, a partial dismissal is in it, part of it still remains. This is a second approach after attorneys for, I don't know there was an attorney for the residents, they did have a representative, but the attorney for, numerous attorneys for the plant board were involved. And at this point, this is a submission, I think, of the city as a result of the meetings that they've had with the plant board and with residents. I didn't attend those meetings, so I can't speak to that. But if this proceeds, it could end up ending the lawsuit by means of settlement, but not necessarily unless the parties agree to it. And I think it'd be appropriate tonight to ask them, once we get in this, what the intention is.
Should we bring it up for motion to entertain the subject at all while we're still in a lawsuit?
Certainly, I think we can entertain it. I think this is a whole new application, and we're not changing our position previously. The application has changed, being resubmitted to us.
As we move forward, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we deliberate what has been asked of us, would it be appropriate to condition our recommendation to the city commission back to conformity and alignment with the proposed resolution that's out there?
No, sir, I do not think so. I think that a proposed resolution is a proposed resolution. An approval of your decision with regard to the comprehensive plan is a totally separate, different issue. Now, it may resolve the other, but I do not believe you can condition one upon the other.
Okay. Does any other commissioner have questions? Let me start on my right and just come down the line. Mr. Stewart, you're first. Do you have any questions of Mr. Logan before we embark on this?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wright?
So this would, if we approve this tonight, that still wouldn't prevent someone who is still disgruntled from wanting to continue that lawsuit. I mean, it's possible that could happen. I mean,
And that could be
that
possible,
could be
yes.
possible.
If everyone is in agreement with this, that is a party to that lawsuit, then that could resolve it. You're saying anyone disgruntled, well.
Yeah,
somebody
or
disgruntled
anything. I
person
realize,
could
yeah,
be
that could be, it could be somebody, all right, I agree.
Mr. Boggs?
No, sir, not at this time. No.
Joyce? Okay. Ms. Cross?
No, thank you.
Another time.
Mr. Lusher? Okay. All right. Then, Madam Secretary, would you call item 2
In
on
accordance,
the new agenda?
in accordance with KRS 100.3244, John Cubine, Board Chair of Frankfurt Electric and Water Plant Board, is requesting project review of the water tank reservoir replacement for property located at 98 Tanglewood Drive in Frankfort, Kentucky. The property is more particularly described as PVA map number 062-20-19-001.00.
Evening, Commission.
Okay. I don't want to make the same mistake I made to begin with the meeting. Any individual who is here to speak on this item, would you please come forward and sign do you have a for and against, Byron?
I probably should do that. Are you for or against? Or do you know? I didn't put for.
We need a for or against.
Because we'll call on
Spot.
both sides.
I want to do all the fors first and the against next. Feel my jacket?
Do I need to swear this out?
Okay. We have 3 individuals who have signed to speak. There are 4.
It's within the comments.
Okay. And it shows that all 3 are speaking for the project. Would the 3 of you please stand to be sworn?
Mr. Billings left the room.
Who?
Mr. Billings.
Did he leave or just step out for a moment?
I feel like he's coming back.
Well, I'm,
We could start.
While we're waiting,
well, we'll wait.
Mr. Logan,
Yes, sir.
this is a utility that has no jurisdiction with the planning and zoning. They can do whatever they want to. Why is this in front of us?
Because the utility doesn't own the property, the city of Frankfurt does. And because the city of Frankfurt made a reference under a specific statute that does entail utilities, that we make a determination as to whether or not it complies with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. Can we vote now? Without your testimony?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hands to be sworn in, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, start with staff.
Eric Cockley, Director, City of Frankfurt Planning and Community Development. As I think,
Does Mr. Logan need to qualify you?
No, sir, this is on a reference with regard to the comprehensive plan only. It's not a zone map amendment.
Okay. I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
sure. As has been mentioned before, this is an application for project review brought to you in accordance with KRS 100.324, which, as we have all gotten to learn in the last 18 months, deals with the slim area where the Planning Commission may review the activities of a utility in regards to its conformance with the comprehensive plan. They brought a similar, although entirely different, application for project review on August 16th of 2018. Staff prepared a staff report with a number of positive findings and a number of negative findings. Following analysis of that report, the Commission submitted comments to the Plant Board with a number of their own findings that led to a conclusion that that project, as proposed, did not conform to the comprehensive plan. You see on the aerial, this is the site. Referenced here is the text of KRS 100.324 that references these utilities shall be referred to the Commission to be reviewed in light of its agreement with the comprehensive plan, and the Commission shall, within 60 days from the day of its receipt, advise the referring body whether it is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So as I said before, now ad nauseum, that's why we're here. So to start, I think the easiest way to talk about this is to talk about some of the differences from the new proposal relative to the previous proposal and relative to what exists today. The existing pair of 4.6 million gallon tanks contain a maximum volume of 9.2 million gallons. The previous proposal put forward to this commission contained a single 7 million gallon tank. The 2020 tank proposal includes a slightly shorter 6.5 million gallon tank, which sits in, generally speaking, the same footprint as the previously proposed 7 million gallon tank. The maximum height of the existing tanks at the top of their sidewall, these are flat tanks, so that is also the top of the tank, is 813.5 feet. The previous proposal was included a dome top that reached 834.5 feet, and the current proposal has been lowered to a lower dome height to 825 feet, which is 9.5 feet shorter than the previous proposal. The visible sidewall, which was discussed before, the existing tank, there was only 6.5 feet visible sidewall between the earthen berm and the top of the tank. The previous proposal included a 28-foot solid visible sidewall. The current proposal includes a 6.5-foot visible sidewall. The way they have achieved that is that there's an earthen berm surrounding a portion of the tank, which includes a retaining wall below that with a maximum height in places of 18 feet in order to break up that visual sidewall from the neighborhood side of the tank. What should be notable about this is that the height of the top of the sidewall has also been reduced, so the height of top of sidewall from the proposed tank now matches the top of sidewall from the previous tank. So the degree to which the tank is taller is made up entirely of the domed roof, not the sidewall again. As I mentioned, existing conditions, the two existing tanks, 4.6 million gallons, I should say, apiece. This is the proposed project. You can see on the screen the circular tank towards the southwest, sitting where that previous tank is, and then the other circular line there would show the approximate placement of the retaining wall. What should also be noted, and I'll be able to show it a little bit more on the next slide, is that they have relocated, or will, with the current proposal, relocated a satellite array in an existing tower away from the neighborhood portion of the property and to the other side of the property. The diagram to the below also depicts the blue line, would show you the top of the current sidewall and top of tank, and the red dome is the height of the proposed tank.
Eric, so just that one tank right there, and where's the retaining wall?
The retaining wall is this curved line
Okay.
right in here. So this is their conceptual landscape plan. As part of this change, as I mentioned, the satellite array would be moved, as would the tower, the existing tower that's, I believe, a refitted aging water tower, and the applicant can correct me if that's inaccurate, would be removed, and a replacement tower would be placed with the satellite arrays up at the northern portion of the property.
What would they do with the rest of the tank area, the old tank area? How
I
would they-
believe the plan is, once the new tank is there, to remove the old tank, and then that would be graded appropriately and seeded and strawed and left as green space. So they've shown some conceptual locations for landscaping, including buffering between that satellite array and the existing fence line on the north of the property. I think that's important to note that while the species may be dictated by a landscape committee, which I'll mention briefly, that in my view is an important location to make sure that we do get some kind of effective landscape screening between the satellite array and what the general public is going to see for the most part, as well as keeping the fence line in that general location. Right now, I believe they're proposing to do a black chain link in addition to the landscaping that would be proposed. So, as I mentioned, this is a conceptual landscape plan, so they're showing some general locations for where they would have buffering and screening. They haven't referenced specific species per se. The intention is that the plant board has committed to spending up to $250,000 and participating in a joint landscape committee with members from the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association to work together on a final landscaping plan for the project. I'll go back to that.
On the satellite array, how tall are those satellites?
I would refer to the applicant rather than guess exactly how tall. I believe the height would allow them to tuck behind that fence and any reasonable screening, so they would likely not be viewed. The thing that you're probably going to see change from the view of the public the most driving down Louisville Road is going to be that tower relocation. Although from the entrance and driving by, you can see the existing tower currently. You have my report. In there, I've stated that the previous negative findings, I believe, have been largely mitigated in the new proposal. I also referenced the commission's own findings and how the current proposal will address those or mitigate those. And with that, I've recommended to the commission that this project conforms to the comprehensive plan. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Eric?
Questions? Okay.
Yeah, on down the road, now, I know the comprehensive plan was rejected because of it, and has been approved because of the conformity. Is this gonna be, would it be possible on down the road, the plant board wants to go in that green space? Is it gonna be a permanent restriction forever and a day? Would it take what if they decided we need more water facilities and we got this wonderful, almost a football-sized green space here? Does this proposal and passage, if it goes forward, is this going to be for a long-term prohibition of anybody doing anything there?
We are not approving what they're doing per se. We are merely making a finding under the statute that it is in conformity.
Okay.
The owner would have to decide if there's going to be something in the future, and then again, we may be back here if
Okay, that's
something
right.
happens that it isn't in conformity.
Thank you.
All right.
Other questions by commissioners? And Mr. Wright, you're welcome to ask
No,
another
I'm
if you
fine,
wish.
thank you.
Other questions by commissioners? Well, Mr. Cockley, you have a copy of the staff item there with you?
Yes, sir.
If you turn to page 8, please, sir, on goal 3. Staff did not imply this, but as I read the policies, number 5 seemed to apply, but I'm not exactly sure how. Can you tell me why it doesn't apply? Maybe that's the question that
Why policy number 5 does not apply?
yeah.
Well, I've referenced that it does appear to support the request.
Oh, okay, that's it at the bottom. No wonder. Okay. I was looking at the one at the top.
Okay.
Okay, never mind. And another question. There are currently 2 tanks there. The replacement tank is a single tank. What if the replacement were 2 tanks? Then wouldn't that make a smaller imprint and have fewer feet linear shown there rather than having a single tank? It's an inquiry.
I think theoretically, you could reach the same volume as proposed with shorter duplicate tanks. I mean, the existing tanks demonstrate that's achievable. I think logistically it might be a challenge to keep service of at least one of those reservoirs while construction happens, which might be one of the large factors for why that's not what's been proposed, because it would involve potentially demolition of both at the same time, and you might not have service of those reservoirs. That's my understanding. I think I would also reference that while the existing tank being placed on the southern portion of the lot also means that to the view from the public, since there will be no tank further to the north, that view shed, one could argue, is improved by going to a single tank rather than duplicate tanks, which would still be visible to some degree.
Okay. Okay. Does any other commissioner have a question? If not, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we would ask that the applicant please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members, Charlie Jones, I'm here on behalf of the Frankfurt Plant Board this evening. We obviously have submitted our new design plans to staff and our narrative to address the negative findings from the August 16th meeting, August 16, 2018 meeting, and the letter that this Planning and Zoning Commission sent with its recommendations. We tried to address those in addition to addressing concerns expressed by the larger community, the Tanglewood Association, even city staff, and we believe we've submitted a plan that is certainly far more aligned with the comprehensive plan than the last plan submittal, and we are in agreement with obviously staff's report, and happy to answer your questions you have.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman. So you're gonna be working with the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association on the landscaping and other?
Yeah, well, up to this point, they worked over the past year and a half with Tanglewood with numerous meetings, board members from the Frankfurt Plant Board, the actual board, met with representatives and took a lot of their suggestions and recommendations, molded them into these plans. Tanglewood has seen these plans. So we try to work that way. Moving forward, yes, we have the $250,000 landscape budget, and we've agreed that the Tanglewood should participate on that committee to determine the siting of the landscape on the property, type of trees and everything like that.
Thank
questions by commissioners?
Charlie, I actually have one, and you may not be the person to answer this one, but it follows up on Mr. Jackson's response, or request, or question regarding one tank versus two tanks. In the future, and this is trying not to open any more hornets than there already are with this, what if the planning board determines that two tanks are more viable than one tank, or the city of Frankfort grows to the extent that needs two tanks, or for emergency preparedness, that one tank could be compromised and there's no backup? Is that taken into consideration into this plan?
Well, because right now there'll be one tank removed, one of the
Okay.
existing tanks removed, the new one will be built, and then the second tank will be removed, so it will just be one tank up there. There remains that old site of the second tank remains, and
Okay.
I think it's projected out that they'd have no expectations of needing a tank until 2060 at the earliest. Now, emergencies could happen, something could happen, could come up. If it does, then it would have to go back to the city and determine if it comes back before this board. But it's certainly, they believe that this plan carries them out for 40-plus years.
Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Jones, I don't know if you're permitted to answer this question or not,
But I'll just say,
but let me put it out there and you decide whether or not you have that authority. I'm interested, and I don't know if my board members are interested or not, but I'm interested in knowing whether or not this application carries with it an answer to the remaining question from the lawsuit.
let me say this. Certainly, I do not represent the Frankfort Plant Board with respect to that particular litigation. I'm not their attorney of record for that. Although my representation over there in this matter, obviously, those are co-independent items, so I do have some knowledge of what's going on. I will echo what Mr. Logan has said, that there's been substantive settlement negotiations that have occurred. Given the nature of lawsuits and attorney-client privilege thing, I can't tell you any specifics of the settlement negotiations, but I know that the Plant Board has recently submitted a settlement proposal to the parties, and the parties are only this board, you all, and the city. Actually, the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association, you mentioned them before, their attorneys, they're not part of that lawsuit. So those three groups are exchanging settlement discussions, and I can say that I firmly believe that this board recommends approval and the city accepts that approval, that lawsuit will be quickly dismissed.
Thank you, sir. Staff has a question of the applicant. There being none, there are three people there, four people there.
It's myself, Mr. Billings is on there only if I needed him to add any technical, so we wouldn't have anything else unless there's other questions.
Okay, Mr. Van Sickle? Well, wait a minute, I'm only asking if you have a question of Mr. Jones at the moment.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
In that case, Mr. Van Sickle, if you'll come forward first, sir. And for the record, if you'll state your name and address.
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Nathan Van Sickle. I live at 400 Leewood Drive. I'm the president of the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association. Over the past several months, the FPB and Tanglewood Neighborhood Association have been in direct contact trying to reach a compromise on the proposed reservoir project. The plan that you have before you addresses many of our concerns. This plan was voted on and overwhelmingly approved by the neighborhood on Tuesday, March 3rd. While this vote was approved, there was a concern moving forward. The plan that has been provided to you are not complete construction plans for the project. The neighborhood would ask that once the complete construction plans are available, they are provided to your staff for review of local building codes, particularly the details of any demolition and drainage during and after completion of the project. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Planning and Zoning Commission for your efforts regarding this project. I would also like to thank the current FPB Board of Directors, the FPB staff, the Frankfort City Commission and the Mayor of Frankfort for their efforts in reaching a compromise on this plan that is agreeable to each party. I encourage you tonight to approve this plan as it has been presented to you. Thank you.
Well, don't go away. Does any commissioner have a question of Mr. Van Sickle? Staff have a question of Mr. Van Sickle.
I'll wait to hear discussion, and that may lead me to a question.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to presume that since he's on your side, you don't have a question.
No questions.
All right, well, Mr. Van Sickle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where's that piece of paper? Okay, and Mr. Billings?
Again, he's with me, we wouldn't have anything to add unless you have technical questions.
Okay. We're ready for any discussion that the commission might want to engage in.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, Mr. Lee?
I'd like to make a motion that the water tank replacement for the property located at 68 Tanglewood Drive in Frankfort, Kentucky conforms to the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Move properly second. Mr. Logan, do we need anything else other than the motion that we have on the table?
To my knowledge, no, sir.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Honaker?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lusher?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Terrell?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next item up, I'm going to recuse myself because I have property in the area and don't want to interfere.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
I'll sit around and wait for you.
Bring snacks.
You'll see.
Especially since a lot of
We need to take a couple of minutes break at this point in time for any who need to visit facilities and et cetera. Please be back in 5 minutes.
You want to come up here, Charles?
We'll call the meeting back to order and ask Madam Secretary, would you call item 3 on the new business?
In accordance with Article 5, Section 5.03 of the Franklin County Zoning Ordinance, the Two Creeks Property Owners Association is requesting a development plan approval for the relocation of an access control gate from its current location on Goshen Road north of Foxley Lane to Goshen Road south of Foxley Lane on a 2.143 acre tract comprising the Goshen Road right-of-way recorded in Plat Cabinet L, Slide 51, in the office of the Franklin County Clerk.
Okay, we'll ask staff, please come forward. You got it?
Got 2 on there so far, but we didn't announce it.
Okay. Well, Robert, if you give me a moment. We have a sign-up list here, and
I know I need to know what he's on.
if you plan to speak on this item, please come forward and sign. And note whether you are speaking for or against.
Mr. Bob Pelosi, were you for or against?
On behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
Okay. Would signees please stand to be sworn?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Robert Hewitt. I'm the Director of Planning and Building Codes for Franklin County. The clerk did call the item. It's for a access control gate with guardhouse relocation on Goshen Road. I would like to start out by passing a revised set of drawings that my office received on March the 9th. And then I'd like to, I'll give my presentation and then note the changes. So I'll take it to one end. If you would, take one and pass it down.
Yes, sir.
And once those copies get all the way to the end, I would like to give you just a moment to review those drawings. The layouts, or the sheet layouts, should be the same. There are some minor details that have changed that, like, as I mentioned, I will note.
Robert, how are these different from the ones we've already received?
Okay, so one item is that the previous plan in the staff report referenced a 4-foot by 8-foot guardhouse. The revised plan is now reflecting a 3-foot by 6-foot guardhouse. The previous plan showed the electric feed for the guardhouse coming from east to west. Now it's coming from the west to the east. The service provider is still with Kentucky Utilities. The electric is noted on page 3.
On page 2 of the plan, the colored portion is no longer colored. Is there a significance to that, or is that just an attempt to save on ink?
Difficult to say. Are you referring to the shaded area that was in the staff report versus the new plan? I believe it was an attempt to make the image easier to read. There is a call-out located on sheet 3 that identifies the edge, the proposed edge of the new asphalt.
22.6 and 21.2.
Robert, you mean this right there? With the new blacktop?
Yeah, so your sheet 3 should look just like that,
Okay.
of your new set. So is are we looking at the set with the date stamp March 9th, 2020 on page 1? Okay.
Two different plans.
Yeah. That's the new one. That's different than that one. shaded.
White shaded too, on the one we received.
The one
Oh,
she just
Yes, I
got.
apologize. I guess the shading didn't turn out as good on mine. I apologize. On the one that I had. So yeah, we're looking at the same one. Yeah, that shading, it's just not as dark as the previous paint.
Oh, I can see
Well, I don't
barely
have
in it.
shading at
I
all.
can
Okay.
see just barely there.
Just the question around is the shading still consistent?
Well, I'm just wondering if there's no difference between
This, that, and this.
the two, then
Yeah, could be
I'm
just
looking
on
at
the
the same
copy.
picture.
There's these two.
We're looking at the same
Just the
picture.
change of this and
Correct.
the KU.
That is correct.
Okay, that's right.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. We're good?
All right, very good, thank you. This item is appearing before you because the property is currently zoned planned residential. So therefore, Article 5 in the zoning ordinance requires the planning commission to approve development plans within that zoning district. It does include a structure, even though it is very, very small. That also would require a building permit and your approval by virtue of a development plan. What's interesting is that Goshen Road is a private road, platted separately, as your clerk indicated, is 2.143 acres. That's recorded in Plat Cabinet L, Slide 51, in the Office of the Franklin County Clerk. Since it is a private road, Franklin County Road Department has no jurisdiction on this, performs no maintenance, and it's not in the road list for Franklin County. So the road superintendent, while he was notified of this request, of course, he has no objection because it's not his road. The proposal is to relocate this guard structure from its current location, roughly 170 feet from the intersection with Georgetown Road, 240 feet south, making it south of its intersection with Foxley Lane, to a distance of 410 feet from the current gate. So in essence, what they're doing is providing clear or open access from Georgetown Road through Goshen to Foxley Lane. There has been substantial development on Foxley Lane, new homes under construction, and there has been a new separate gate constructed on Foxley Lane, or the access easement that we were referring to as Foxley Lane. I did receive one concern from adjacent property owner about this plan, who obtained a copy of it. The difference between what is currently existing and the proposal is that the current guardhouse and gates have board fencing that run adjacent or parallel to the roadway. That prohibits anyone from bypassing and driving around the gate arms themselves. This new proposal does not have that feature, so the adjacent property owner has a concern that perhaps people could bypass the gate by driving through their property. I have discussed this with the project engineer, and I believe they'll be able to discuss some options that we would like to have noted, if approved, on the development plan. Let's see, secondly, I have received a letter from an individual who would like to have it presented to the commission. It's addressed to the chairman, Mr. Jackson. If the commission's willing to receive it, I'd like to pass it out. It's a letter along with some photographs.
Thank you, sir.
This letter that you're receiving specifically addresses the new gate that was installed along the access easement that I referred to relating to Foxley Lane. So, and just so the record is clear, these photographs are not of the proposed gate by the Two Creeks Property Owners Association, but of a privately constructed gate recently by residences on Foxley and the adjacent access easement.
So for clarity, the request does not impact the existence of this gate since it's a private construction any whatsoever.
Correct. I believe the individual just wanted to verify that the gate they constructed was constructed securely. So.
Okay, so.
So, the application by the Two Creeks Property Owners Association was submitted to the technical review team for review. There are underground utilities in this area. There were no objections from the utility providers. The fire chief has reviewed this and has no objections. With that, staff has recommended approval.
Are there issues related to the safety of the entrance and the location of the new gate and et cetera?
I'm unaware of any safety concerns. I would only note that Goshen, as you exit the neighborhood, you do drive up an incline to the curve, and then the gate is located just beyond the curve. There is a notation on sheet 3 where they propose to construct a sign stating "Be prepared to stop." So that would potentially help motorists be aware that the new gate is just beyond the curve. I don't know the grade of that stretch of roadway. Once again, it is private. The project engineer is here present and probably could address your question in greater detail.
Rob, addressing that curve, not necessarily the incline, do you know if there was any visual barriers in that curve? Because it does appear to be an upline curve, just looking at a flat map, especially if you're exiting.
Right. If you don't mind, I'd prefer that the engineer who designed this present that to you, since he's the one he and his client have determined the proper location for it to meet their needs. If you don't mind, I'd defer that to the applicant or to the engineer.
Okay, well, from the perspective of county planning and zoning, does the location of the gate in relation to the curve and to the incline, does it present, whether it's a private road or not, does it present a safety concern?
If you're referring to not being able to see it as you come up the hill and around the curve, it does present that potential. Rock could be removed to make that visible so you could see it long before you, or sooner before you got to it.
Could that gate be moved back a little bit further to right before Foxy Lane? You know, just looks like you got 20, 30 feet or whatever.
Well, if you refer back to sheet 3, there is a sewer easement and a sewer line.
Oh, right there.
Yes, that cuts across the roadway. It's shaded, and I believe that's why it's no closer to Foxley than what it is. Because the structure will be sitting on a concrete pad, and it appears to be a 12-foot wide sanitary sewer easement.
So is the intent of the entire exercise of moving the guard shack to prevent access to Two Creeks from Foxley Lane? Because it appears currently that you could access around that guard shack, is that correct?
Well, the intent of moving the structure is not an issue I got involved with. I believe there were discussions between the Two Creeks neighborhood and the residences of Foxley Lane that I was not privy to. So I'm not sure why the intent to move it was.
Well, I mean, just for comfort purposes, we're not trying to put you in the catch-22.
I understand.
There just seemed to be some additional clarity that we need in order to be able to make a sound decision, and so I want to ask you before we ask other people to see if you can answer the question, and if not, then we'll ask the other presenters. Is that fair
Yeah, maybe that's fine.
representation there? Okay. Other questions?
I did have, Bob, you mentioned earlier about the guard shack that, or guard building that's gonna be going up, doesn't apparently have any sideboards to prevent anybody going around it. Does that fall into the purview of our concerns here? I mean, it seemed to be that, how is that a zoning issue? I mean, if they don't do that, is that something we need, would that cause it to be, how does that fall within our interest?
Because it's a concern of the adjacent property owner, and if there were, let me see if I can back this up. If there were
I see.
a fence much like that, then if you require something to that, you would reduce the potential of property damage by virtue of your approval of a development.
Okay. Right.
Now, that seems like a very good picture. Do you mind walking over to the screen, and can you point out exactly where we're moving the guard shack to?
Okay, so, yes, sir, I'd be happy to. So, if I'm in a vehicle at this location, I'm on Georgetown Road, okay? And then I'm turning right on the Goshen. And as I pull up, I come to this guard shack. Ravencrest Apartments are located to the right. This represents Foxley Lane, and then it turns into a private access easement with other homes. Okay? And then, you're right, the guard shack is blocking the street from this view, but if we make it through the guard shack, that's a shadow there, but Foxley Lane would be sitting right in this approximate location. So the photograph takes a pretty good jump and goes straight to the curve. If we go to the aerial, that might be of assistance. So once again, top of the screen, Georgetown Road, existing guardhouse with gates, Foxley Lane, and then proposed location. Can everyone see that?
And Robert, you're saying you couldn't go closer to Foxley Lane because of that utility easement? When we're-
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Let me point it out. So this rectangle represents the guardhouse, the new guardhouse.
Uh-huh.
This is the sewer line with a 6-foot easement on both sides. So if you keep the road, the guard shack centered, to go any further up, you would only gain a few feet.
Okay, and so looking at the incline and the crest of that, you indicated that in the construction, in the new construction or whatever, that could be leveled a bit so that approaching this curve would not be as much of a safety hazard as it currently may be.
Let me point out two things. The engineer had some survey pins located, which are represented by these points. All right, so there's not much room between the private property lines and the edge of this existing edge of asphalt, or even less on the proposed edge of asphalt. There are other underground utilities and gas lines in this area, so proper cover needs to be maintained over those utilities. So the answer to that is, I would defer back to the engineer. There was no discussion or representation of leveling any of the earth out to provide additional visibility. So the answer is a maybe, but I'll let the engineer address it more specifically.
If you move the guardhouse up to the edge of the sewer line, how many feet would you gain?
Oh, I didn't bring my scale with me. I apologize. I don't, just looking at it, trying to scale it by eye, you might get 10 feet.
So potentially move it all 10 feet further away from the curb. potentially.
Correct, yeah. So if this represents 12.5 feet, we might get 10 feet, maybe 12 to here. So the sewer department, I'm sure, would not want the concrete pad to encroach within their easement. So the concrete pad extends out beyond the walls of the guardhouse itself. So there is a little room to maneuver it.
Rob, was there any discussion with emergency services? Is it-
Just through the fire chief, not emergency management.
Okay. Just the concern of going through that guard check, you're going immediately into a hard 90-degree turn.
Well, the bigger concern for fire apparatus is the weight limit on the one-lane bridge at the bottom of the hill.
Okay.
So that is not the preferred entry point, if at all possible,
Right on.
for the fire department. If they happen to bring a tanker truck, they would likely come in through the front entrance on Country Lane. Emergency management has Suburbans, so they can make that quite easily.
Okay.
Let's see, am I going the right way? There we go.
Rob, one other question. Do you have indication of north, south, east, and west on that map?
Yes, sir, so top of the map will be, is due north.
Top of that's due north?
Correct.
Okay.
That image is from the county GIS system with 2019 aerial orthos.
Other questions? Okay, does the applicant have a question of staff? Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Pelosi, he's the applicant's engineer? Okay, I don't think he'd have a question. Mr. Richard Sutherland, you have a question of the staff?
I'd like to make some comments.
Well,
about some of these issues.
we'll get to that. Right now, we're just trying to get past the required.
I don't have a question of the staff at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Now, would the applicant please come forward?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bill Ayer. I'm the attorney for Two Creeks Property Owners Association. I have with me Mr. Robert Pelosi, the engineer, and rather than me spending a lot of time here talking, I'm going to turn it over to him, let him describe the nature of the project and answer the questions that you all have raised about various locations and fences and that sort of thing.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bob Pelosi.
You gotta do the same thing that Mr. Ayers did. State your name and address for the record, please,
Yes,
sir.
sir. My name is Bob Pelosi. I live at 311 Stonehenge Street.
Okay, and you're the engineer?
I am the engineer.
Okay.
So I was engaged by the Two Creeks Property Owners Association this past December to prepare a site plan and development plan application that you see in front of you to relocate the gate beyond Foxley Lane. There's been some allusion to the why. The intent was to, my understanding was to relocate the access control to a point that creates, that eliminates a bypass of the Two Creeks security system.
Okay, and so what you've done is where you've placed it provides free access to Foxy Lane, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was the intent?
Which is not part of the Two Creeks subdivision,
Okay.
that's my understanding.
Okay. You heard the other questions?
Yes, I did.
So in regards to safety, I'm a professional engineer. First and foremost, above my clients' desires, I have to hold the health, safety, and welfare of the general public paramount. So with that, this site plan was prepared in accordance with road design standards, particularly the AASHTO policy on geometric design of highways and streets. And there was performed an intersection site distance analysis for turns to and from Foxley Lane, both left and right directions, as well as a horizontal curve site distance analysis on the approach to the exit lane. I have
And you're gonna put that in layman's terms, right?
Yes, we looked at how well you could see the guard shack from coming up and down the hill, and we looked at how well you could see it from turning onto and off of Foxley to make sure that this was not presenting a safety issue. You know, it's important to note that the intent of this project is not a safety enhancement, but I have made some recommendations to the owners that could enhance the safety of the gate. But I don't think, in my professional opinion, as it's presently presented, does not present a safety hazard.
While you're performing those safety standards of the approaches to and from the guard gate, did you take into consideration all hours of the day? There was a point to me asking the north-south direction. It appears that the approach exiting the gate is headed due west, or very nearly due west, correct?
The approach exiting towards Georgetown Road?
Yes, before you hit the curve.
Is headed due west,
Correct.
as you're coming up the hill on Goshen, and then you
Right.
make a 90-degree turn north to the gate.
So you're heading directly into the sun before you hit the curve, correct?
Yes.
And certain times of the day.
I suppose, yes.
Okay.
That is not a factor that is in consideration in the process of horizontal curve site distance analysis, or the intersection site distance were the two criteria that were evaluated regarding the safety of this street.
Okay. Understood.
And
So,
Mr. Stewart, I'm sorry.
so is it my understanding that people who are accidentally get down to the gate and realize they can't get through there, will there be a place for them to turn around there at the gate, or are they going to have to back up all the way to Foxley Lane?
accidentally get to the gate coming from Georgetown Road?
Yes.
Well, they will be about 60 feet from Foxley Lane,
Right.
and that would be closer place to turn around than the existing turnaround from the gate, which would be backing up towards the Frankfurt Sewer Department's pump station that is near the intersection with Georgetown Road. So we are improving that condition.
But it is a little wider there, where you
We-
can't now.
The current width at the gate of an existing condition is 29 feet, and we're proposing 30 foot of pavement.
1 foot difference.
But the adjacent property, excuse me, oh, go ahead, Charles.
If there was concern with safety, could you move that gate? I think Robert mentioned maybe, is it 10 feet or something closer to the easement? If people are concerned about coming around the corner, closer to the easement?
Physically, yes, we can look, when we can look at that. I might add that part of the analysis that was done, including several site visits, and looking at it from different angles as you come up the hill, the way that the rock line is behind the adjacent property owner's house, actually having the gate a little back closer into the curve gives you a little bit earlier visibility of it rather than if it was further around the curve. So that gives you some additional stopping site distance. You see it earlier in this
At
kind
that
of
location?
I believe I would have to study that a little bit more specifically, but we originally had it further and we moved it back as a result of the sewer easement, as requested by the sewer department. And when I ran the stopping site distance calculation, I actually got a longer number in the current location.
And this was, the speed limit posted in this subdivision is 25 miles per hour. This curve, I looked at it from a geometric standpoint, and it's got an 80-foot radius. That with a 2% cross slope of the pavement, that it makes a design speed of about 20 miles per hour. So using that criteria, the required stopping sight distance is 95 feet, and we're providing 110.
Are you all adjusting the curve to some extent? I mean, because in the drawings, it looks like it's more of a gradual and not quite that 90-degree that it looks to be on.
We are not adjusting the alignment of the roadway. The center line will stay the same. What we're doing is introducing a pavement taper to the edge of pavement so that where in the existing condition it's approximately 20 feet wide as it goes around the curve. And what we'll do is as it comes around the curve, the center line will stay the same, but the edges will taper out to accommodate a wider pavement section.
Okay. Just didn't look quite the same.
Well, Mr. Stewart did not say it, but I guess I'll put it to you directly. If there's an additional 10 feet, 12 feet there between your proposed location and a location closer to Foxley Lane, and this commission identifies a preference that you utilize that distance to provide a greater degree of safety, in our opinion, for those people approaching and coming, that incline and coming through that curve, what would be your response?
I don't think we would have any objection to shifting it forward to the north direction to the extent that we can to the sewer easement. That would not be objectionable.
Does that get at it,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Thank you.
Okay. Other question?
There's one more. Let's follow up with Mr. Boggs' question regarding the turnaround, the existing. You mentioned the existing guard shack, you would have to back up into the Frankfurt Sewers Department, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so a public entity. The proposed gate, that adjacent property owner in that corner, is that part of Foxley Lane development, or is that part of Two Creeks?
It is similar to the pump station property. It is private property with permanent utility easements.
Okay, so that's
Foxley Lane
private.
and the pump station are both private property with permanent easements.
But does that owner belong to Two Creeks or to Foxley Lane? And have they been consulted? I know where Mr. Boggs is going. If someone has to turn around, they suddenly turn down the wrong street, they get down past Foxley Lane, they come to a guard shack, they have to turn around. You're suggesting they put it in reverse and go back to Foxley Lane. Some people can back up better than others. What kind of damage would that do to that adjacent property owner? Being a public
There's
entity,
a lot of
not a
variables
being
in the
private
question.
entity, but a public entity.
The driveway to the pump station and the Foxley Lane street have the same ownership and easement restriction. Neither one of them are public ways.
Agreed, but if you've moved the guard shack and someone turns down the Goshen Lane, gets down past Foxley Lane, hits the guard shack, realizes they're in the wrong spot, needs to turn around. I guess my question is, what protection does that, I'm seeing a house right in the corner,
Yes.
correct? And that's private property. Is there any provisions to protect that private property's property from cars, et cetera? I think this goes back to a previous concern regarding the fencing.
Yes, sir.
Other things going around.
Since the application has been filed, that issue has been brought to my attention, and it is my understanding that both Two Creeks Property Owner Association and the adjacent property owner both would like to have that barricade there to prevent vehicles from going around the gate through his property. We discussed that, I discussed that with Columbia Gas, who has an easement that virtually occupies the entire width of the open lot in between Goshen and the house that you see there in the lower corner.
Okay.
So their only restriction on the barricade was a fence. It's a 12-inch high-pressure gas main that runs through there. I believe that serves Toyota.
Okay.
They did not want a fence over that gas line. We talked about some alternatives, maybe some stone boulders that with some spacing in between them, nothing sitting directly on top of the gas line. Space close enough that a vehicle could not get through, but maybe Foxley Lane residents who have golf carts or members of the Frankfort Country Club could get through there, or the gas pipeline company didn't have any underground footings or fence posts in their easement.
How much would those barriers encroach on the adjacent property owner?
None. The Two Creeks Property Owners Association has enough has enough space within what I'll call the right of way in their property outside beyond the edge of pavement along the entire width of the proposed roadway to allow for that. And I've actually had a note added to the plans that say, do not disturb adjacent property, no grading, paving, or other construction activity outside of TCPOA property is on the site plan.
Okay.
Other question? If not, Mr. Pelosi, now you've heard our concerns and et cetera, and you have some idea of what we might be thinking about asking you to do, but what would be your solution to our concerns?
Well, I did prepare a document making some recommendations to the Two Creeks Property Owners Association that could enhance the safety of the current proposal. In addition to the sign that's currently on the plans, I would recommend extending or restriping the roadway from the new gate around the curve past the sign to encourage drivers to stay within their lanes with current standard retro or reflective thermoplastic striping. I've also recommending an advisory speed limit in advance of the be prepared to stop sign posting 20 miles per hour. I've also recommended the addition of thermoplastic raised rumble stripes, just the stripes that go across the road where they give you just a little vibration as you go across them. Should you not see the sign due to the sun or anything like that, you get a sensory reminder that you're approaching a curve in a stop condition. And the last thing that I included was enhancing the site lighting, but with the caveat recommendation to have a luminaire study done by a qualified lighting designer so as not to adversely impact the neighboring residences.
Okay, you didn't mention anything about moving the guard shack site back
Well,
closer to.
Forgive me, I thought that I previously acknowledged we have no objection to do that should it.
Well, I'm asking for your solution, so you didn't include that, so I was beginning to think that you had an objection to it, even though you
No,
said you
sir.
didn't.
I have no objection to examining relocating the guard shack to confirm if it.
How far?
All the way to as far as possible as we can without encroaching the sewer easement.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you're doing the barrier.
Yes, I'm going to have a conversation with the adjacent property owner as well and make sure that what Two Creeks is proposing is agreeable with him, and we will reflect that on revised drawings if necessary. No objections to a barrier.
Okay.
Actually, one last question.
Are there?
Okay, one last. The recommendations that you made to Two Creeks, you said they were recommendations. Were they adopted by Two Creeks or agreed upon by Two Creeks?
They have not been yet. I just got them to them formally today. I had presented them some of these options at their board meeting on Monday, on Monday. And that was after the fact, or after the submission to the County Planning and Zoning Department.
Do they have any, at this board meeting, do they have any objections to any of those recommendations?
Not to my knowledge, they seem to be open to them and willing to consider that none of these things were extensive cost additions to the project, and didn't seem to have any objection. Be willing to add them to the plan.
The staff have a question, let me stop that. Do you have anything else you need to present to us as it relates to this item?
No, sir, but glad to answer any additional questions.
Okay, we may be coming back. But does the staff have a question of the engineer?
No, sir.
Mr. Sutherland, do you have a question of the engineer?
I do not, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Pelosi, I did pronounce that correctly, did I not?
You sure did.
Okay. Thank you, sir, and we'll get back with you. Mr. Ayers is there.
It's all for the applicant.
Okay. At this point, we'll ask Mr. Richard Sutherland to please come forward.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Richard Sutherland. I live at 70 Foxley Lane. I'm a practicing professional civil engineer. I've been in the business since 1971. I've been licensed since 1977, and I worked for the Transportation Cabinet as a scholarship student while I was going to UK. I practiced with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet along with Russ Wright for a long time. But a lot of what I did throughout my career with the cabinet, and even since then, was look at safety issues, talking about site distance for entrance permits. I was chief district engineer in the Highway District 5 office, and we processed all the requests for entrance permits, and one of the things we had to do was look at what is the site distance, what's the stopping distance, all those things that factor into whether or not that entrance is safe. And we have a couple of concerns with the safety of this particular location here, but before I talk about those, there was a comment about the gate to US 460 about it being a new gate. There's been a gate there since 1860. It was that was the original driveway for the old manor house that was the manor house for that entire property back there that Will and Karen May lived in. And I've been living there for 23 years. That gate has been unlocked for 23 years that I've been there. And I'll guarantee you that it was unlocked for many, many years before that. So any notion that there's some sudden security issue to us never has made any sense. The other thing, the issue about the rock cut, I think that's been resolved. But when you're coming up that steep grade, which is, I don't know exactly what the slope is, I would guess 4 to 6% grade, which is pretty steep. There is a rock cut right behind Artie Van Houten's house, and that's where he lives in the corner. There's a rock cut there, and that rock cut extends almost all the way to the corner. So trying to daylight that rock cut would require a whole lot of reshaping of that property, and probably would get into the corner of Artie's house if you really got into trying to remove any of that rock to improve the sight distance through there. I have driven that curve probably an average of twice a day for 23 years, going to work and going to play, et cetera, and 20 miles an hour is probably a minimum speed that you see people coming up that hill. For those of us that's used to it, we have to swing way to the right if a car's coming up, because they almost invariably overshoot their target coming around that curve. They're coming too fast, and they have a tendency to swing out into the other lane. So if you look at how long it takes for a vehicle to stop, and it's called stopping distance, a car going 20 miles an hour, it takes 115 feet to stop it. Part of that is reaction time. It's 2.5 seconds of reaction time for the driver. It's the distance the car travels at 20 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds. And then it's also the time it takes for the brakes on the car to stop the vehicle. So you're looking at about 115 feet. And that's from the point, when you're coming up the hill, you measure that from a point 3.5 feet off the inside of that curve where the drivers are coming up the hill, where that driver can actually see around that curve. You have to have a line of sight to the nearest impediment of at least 115 feet to be able to stop your vehicle. So we question that, that the location of that is safe, particularly if there's more than one car in the queue there. If for some reason the gate's not operating properly and you've got a couple of cars stopped, you're in danger of people coming around that curve and hitting a parked vehicle, basically a stopped vehicle. The other issue that we're concerned about is the turning radius coming out of Foxley, making that left turn. I don't think there'll be a problem for cars, but it's not just cars that come out of Foxley Lane. You have delivery vehicles that are panel trucks, that sort of thing, emergency vehicles that are larger type vehicles that may need to make the left out of Foxley and go down the hill. So I think that's something that needs to really be looked at. And so those are the issues that we're really concerned about. And I heard that there was a safety study. The safety study wasn't in anything that I saw earlier. So if there's I think those issues need to be looked at and possibly looked at by an independent engineer that would take a look at this, that's not affiliated with either the people for or the people against this, to see if there is an issue there that can be resolved. But we think that the result of moving that gate to that location is created an unsafe condition for Two Creeks Property Owner Association and anybody else that tries to traverse Goshen Lane. So I'm willing to take any questions anybody may have. Yes, sir.
Charlie.
If we move the gate 10, 12 feet, do you think that's going to help?
That
go
could
further
help.
away?
That could help get you that when you come around that curve, that 3.5 foot point that I was talking about. That would help you get a little more distance to the gate, but it may complicate the radius coming out of Foxley Lane, making that left to get through that chute. You don't want people to pull out of Foxley, make a left, and probably not in a car, but in a truck. You may have to pull out, stop, back up, reposition your vehicle to go through the chute. So that you're kind of splitting hairs here, trying to make both of these conditions work, and I don't think either one of them works.
Well, since you raised it, how does a larger vehicle exit Foxley Lane now?
You have
radius.
Well, you have FedEx, you have UPS that come up there regularly. Garbage trucks come up there regularly. I don't know how much room it would take. There's a program that engineers use to figure what that is, and you'd have to run that program to see if that vehicle, those design vehicles, can make it through that gate.
Well, how do they come out now? That's my question.
Well, I think some of them come up Foxley, make a left, come down the hill, and service houses down in Two Creeks Property Owner Association. I think there's no impediment now to them making their route however they want to make the route. So they can come in off of 460 and go up there and come back down and go down into the bottom, or there's no impediment to them making that move.
To make the turn, you mean?
Yeah, to make that turn. Yeah, they can make that turn out of Foxley with no problem and go down the hill. The only problem you have is making your turn and getting over in that other lane before somebody runs over you coming up the hill. That's your big problem.
Well, Rich, I know you're not arguing, you're not being negative, but you're not here arguing for it. If you were looking at that, and apparently it's thought that the proposed gate, the old gate is somewhat unsafe too, what would you say might be something that would be somewhere that would satisfy your concerns over safety, but also would assist those who think that old gate is not a good situation either?
I think that's probably
somebody else's argument.
That'd probably be contrary to any opinion that I would have. I think the existing location is perfectly fine. People can pull off of there. You've got room to come off of 460 and stop.
So
and if there are multiple cars doing that, and you see multiple cars there a lot, if you come off and you have a safe way to back up onto public property to make that turn, and and go back out on the 460 without worrying about any other cars or any impediments. So I think the best solution is leave it where it is, if you're looking at safety issues.
Other questions?
Any questions?
But don't leave yet.
Actually,
Okay.
yes, Mr. Sutherland, one question, and
Yes, sir.
we've touched it a couple of times. So you mentioned 3.5 feet site radius. How much distance between the proposed gate and that, have you measured how much that is, and then how much if there was 1, 2, 3 cars there? 'Cause I know
I
at certain
haven't, I tried to
times-
look at, I got a copy of the plan day before yesterday, and the copy I had was kind of dark. I couldn't tell if there were any dimensions
Okay.
that would show you what that distance is from where you can see around that curve to through the gate, or to a car parked at the gate. I couldn't make that determination. But the 3.5 feet I'm talking about is 3.5 feet off the ground,
Right.
straight line to whatever impediment is in front of you. It takes you 115 feet to stop at 20 miles an hour. So you gotta be able to see about that far to know that you have to stop. And there's no room for error.
Personal opinion, how many, personal, I guess anecdotal evidence, how many cars use that entrance to Two Creeks on a daily basis?
You know, I don't really know, but it's heavy in the morning, people going out. Traffic coming in, there's really not much of an issue coming in and going down the hill. It's just the people coming up and going around the curve. Sometimes they're going a little too fast and swing out. I don't know what that number would be. I'd say it's fairly heavily used.
Okay, does staff have a question of, Mr. Sutherland?
No, sir.
Where is it, Mr.? Does the applicant have a question? Okay. Well. Mr. Sutherland, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're at the point where we as members of the commission need to discuss to the extent that we are comfortable moving forward, and we need a recommendation with regard to approval or non-approval of the development plan. We'll get the conversation started here. As we heard the presentations of the applicant and those wishing to speak with regard to this proposal, several issues that present themselves, and the positives that come with the proposed modifications and et cetera. The engineer agreed that there may be some concerns and issues related to the curve and the slope of the incline. But there were also suggestions as to how that could be addressed. The question is, does the staff presentation support approval without conditions, or
If we,
with conditions, or do we?
if we approve this with all the safety conditions that we've talked about, including potentially moving back that guard shack 10, 12 feet, if we could be able to include all of those in potential approval.
Well, it's easy enough to discern that. Let us ask our legal counsel if he would provide us advice with regard to whether or not the suggestions that we identified with regard to modifications that might occur, would those be appropriate, meaning allowed?
Certainly suggestions would be allowed, but I can't say whether or not that's sufficient. That's a decision.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that piece. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't do something that was illegal or say something that was,
If I think you do, I will say so.
okay.
Mr. President, will we need the plan to come back with all the safety equipment and revised as we talked about? Should we have another plan come back where we can see it?
Well, that's an idea.
You know, Mr. Sutherland, although he did voice his personal, as an engineer and a resident there, his disapproval. If you remember earlier, he did suggest the possibility of having an independent, another group to take a look at it, someone who was not directly involved on either side. I mean,
I think we can ask our engineer, the commission has an engineer to look at things that are submitted, but I don't think the commission has the authority to demand that someone other than the engineer purchased by Two Creeks. We can't make them pay for a new engineer. Maybe that's what I'm saying, but we can get our engineer to take a look at whatever is submitted if we think it's appropriate to table this issue to the next meeting and have some of that stuff looked at and presented back to us.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that. I think there have been a lot of safety issues brought up. I would recommend that so we get a chance to look at those issues.
Okay, but is that permissible, Mr. Legal Counsel? Is it permissible
for us to ask that the county provide an engineering study? Mr. Chairman?
No. What I'm asking is, A, is it appropriate for the commission to table this issue, have the safety issues looked at and brought back to us after the county engineers has taken a look at it and then move forward?
The question is it appropriate? I can't answer that. Do you have
Is
the
it
authority
permissible?
to do it? Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, if I may, I think the earlier point you made was that the planning commission traffic engineer would look at it, as opposed to the county engineer who's just a civil engineer, not a traffic engineer.
Right.
Okay.
Whoever we have a contract with.
Yes, sir. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Chairman, I'll make a proposal to table the issue so we can get a chance to look at the safety concerns. Motion.
Is there a second?
One concern before I second that, the cost of our engineer looking over the safety issue. Okay, thank you. That's answered my question. I will second that motion.
Moved and properly second that the applicant be instructed to go back and make the proposed or suggested modifications to address the issues raised, and a new plan be submitted to the commission to be reviewed by our engineer and brought back to the next meeting.
I do have a question.
Question.
Robert, I don't want to put you on the spot. Don't get mad.
That's
But
okay.
when we went through all this and you all looked at things, wasn't there supposed to be an engineering component then, or was it what, upon recommendations or by, was there not any, this apparently is not an issue now, I mean, coming forward when it was presented to us, okay, a safety issue. I mean, I haven't read most of it, but was there any issues or any findings in regard to the potential safety issues in regard to that house?
No, sir, there wasn't. There's a couple of reasons why. One, it's not a county road, so the county road superintendent
There you go.
doesn't care what they do.
Right.
It's a private road, private property. It's a 3-foot by 6-foot guard shack. Very, minimal. Goshen Road likely doesn't meet any of the design standards in the current road subdivision regulations. None of the roads in the country club, were requested to comply with any of the county regulations because they intended and always will be private. So I did not request to expend any planning commission funds for your traffic engineer to look at it. The engineer for the applicant is registered and has done quite extensive analysis, and I felt as though he did a very good job. I'm shocked at how much analysis he did on this project. I was very impressed, and I thought his testimony made it clear that he looked at it from all angles.
But I think for purposes of planning commission, whether it's a private road or not, if we have to approve the development plan, we have an obligation to look at the health, safety, and welfare of the users of the facility. And the proposal by Commissioner Stewart allows us to be able to see the outcome of that in a way that allows us, I think, to make an informed decision and not be seen as having placed anyone at risk by having done so. And that shouldn't take us that long. It also allows the applicant to come back before us without having to pay a new fee.
Well, but does the commission want to put itself in a position of proposing moving, and I agree with Charles on the safety issue. Do we want to put ourselves in a position of us making a decision on where to put this shack in regard to safety issues? We don't, we qualify, unless we have some consultation that we can provide us.
If it's reviewed again, they may come back with a better situation.
Yeah.
If I could also add, staff did not require a traffic analysis done because it did not meet the threshold covered within Part 5 of your subdivision and development plan regulations. So otherwise, if it exceeded the threshold, it immediately would have gone to your traffic engineer, and that would have been part of your report, and part of the presentation, and your traffic engineer would have been present this evening. But the 3x6 guardhouse nowhere near meeting that threshold. So
An independent engineer might tell us that.
that's likely the response you're going to get. But you never know.
Other comments on the motion? Not? Madam Secretary, if you do us the honor, call the roll.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Honaker?
Yes.
Mr. Lusher?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Terrell?
Yes.
Mr. Wright? Mr. Jackson?
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Is that all of it? Yeah. We're adjourned.
Next meeting.